Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC and I'm back today with this very sunny weather that hopefully we're having today because it is the Queen's Jubilee weekend. And what better way to enjoy the Jubilee than to show you a car that the Queen has not only one but at least two examples of. It's the Rover P5B. Now this for its time was a very luxury car and it's an incredible car even to today. So I'm going to spend some time today with my friend Martin and his glorious P5B. I'm going to show you around the outside of the car, talk to you about the vehicle, and I'm even going to take you out for a test drive. It's one of the poshest, most beautiful cars that we've had on the channel for quite some time, and I'm very excited to show you it. So let's kick off the Jubilee weekend and go and have a look at this marvellous Rover. The Queen had two, Margaret Thatcher arrived at Downing Street in one, and even Harold Wilson had one. It's the Rover P5B. It's sometimes called the poor man's Rolls Royce, but as you'll see on this test, it's not the poor man's anything. And in fact, the car in many ways has aged better than a Rolls. The quality is comparable and the ride is just as charming. Over 20,000 was sold in less than a decade, and for a car that was far from the cheapest on the market, that's pretty good going. Now, kicking off with the engine chatter, the P5 had packed what at the time appeared to be plenty of power with the six-cylinder engine, but the P5B went a leap further with the introduction to the car of the Buick-supplied Rover V8 engine. Now you might be saying, well, why didn't Rover just make their own? Well, the reason that Rover decided to go for the Buick engine and didn't go back to the chalkboard and design their own was simply down to cost. The money just wasn't there to design something new, and the Buick unit was well known and tried and tested. So essentially there wasn't a gamble putting it into the new P5B, giving it 160 horsepower. The car did 0 to 60 in around 12.5 seconds with a top speed of 110 miles per hour. This might seem positively lethargic in today's modern world, but at the time it was respectable and put it ahead of many other cars. The Mark III 3-litre auto evolved peaked at 104 and took 17 seconds to reach 60, which meant that buyers saw a real uptick in performance. Performance-wise within the range, the car was almost bang on with the 2000 TC, which at the time was Rover's fastest car on sale. It wasn't only performance which improved, and the MPG saw a slight improvement too. Well, only slight because it increased from around 16 to 17 miles per gallon to around 20 miles per gallon. Hardly amazing, but for Rover and the Rover customer, it was fine. The engine was paired with the 3-speed auto with torque converter, and the brakes were discs all round with servo to front. We look at these cars today and they're majestic and head turners, but at the time the production volumes were never intended to be massive. Sales peaked very quickly, and the early days were good. So they had 85 cars a week planned for production, and production volume had to double to meet that demand in the early days. By the end of production, it had really tailed off. And so when you look at it across the lifespan of the car, the average weekly production was around 50 cars per week. Hardly much to shout about. Now, many people will tell you that the saloon massively outsold the coupe. There is a reason for this. It's because government officials and big organisations ordered the saloon over the coupe, which is why you see a lot more of those about. Now, despite all of this, the P5B actually was never intended to set the world alight. Rover just wanted to keep the target audience warm whilst they came up with something new. If you're watching this from abroad and you're looking and thinking, I don't think I've ever seen a P5B, and you're really not familiar with them, it might be because they just never reached you, which in my opinion might be why the sales volumes just didn't hit where they needed to hit. Now, America, for example, never got these cars because the American Rover division decided, they took a big decision and they said, you know what, let's just focus on the P6, that's all we're going to sell in terms of this sort of level. So they never actually got the P5B. However, these were sold in Europe, and if you're watching from the Netherlands, this might be a familiar Rover to you because it was the most popular European export destination for these cars. Now, this is a very brief overview of the car, but I have used a book for the research. It's called the Rover P5 and P5B. I think it's called The Full Story, The Complete Story. It's by a man named James Taylor. It's a fantastic book. It's an older book, but I'd still heartily recommend it if you're looking to buy one of these cars or you want to learn more, because there's loads of information in the book. Now, before we discover the car in greater detail, I'd like to introduce you to the owner, Martin. So Martin, it's over to you.
Hi, my name's Martin. I live in Kent, and this is my Rover, 1973 Rover P5B saloon. I bought the car recently. I've only had it just coming up for 2 months, because basically it's an exact clone of one I had to sell about 14 years ago when I was a bit broke. And I always miss that car, and I vividly still remember the tail lights going down the road on the evening that I sold it. So when this one came up, it's the exact same colour, exact same spec, exact same year as the one that I used to have. I thought to myself, I've got to have that car. So I did, and I'm very, very pleased with it. It's not needed too much doing to it. Done a little bit of cosmetic work, and I've still got some in the pipeline because there's always something to do. But overall, I'm very pleased with it, and it's made a nice little addition to my fleet.
This is one of those cars that I've been genuinely quite excited to take out because this ticks all the boxes for me. I love Rovers of this age, cars of this era are my absolute favourite, and I'm getting to come out in something that you just don't ever see very much of. And I've been awfully excited about coming out and seeing it. And I've done I don't know if you saw the video a couple of weeks back of the Nissan Escargot, but I did that this morning and I'm doing this afternoon. And even though the Escargot was so rare and it was so interesting, it was this car that I was most excited for. Now, what I wanted to kind of try and convey when we've come inside here is just how thoughtfully it's put together inside as well as out. So it's little touches on the outside that I probably should have mentioned. Things like the coach line was exactly so many, well, the equivalent of so many millimetres below a certain point. It had to be finished in a certain way. And when you come inside here, you start seeing that the same tolerances that were applied when they were checking the paintwork, checking the panel gaps, have been applied in here as well. Because this vehicle is no spring chicken, and yet somehow the leather on these seats has worn far better than vehicles that have been made in the last 20 years. It's still relatively up together, even though it's showing, well, it says it's only on 16,000 on the clock, but there's no way it's only on 16,000. No way. And so it's done a lot of miles, it's been round, and yet it still has that luxury, because when you buy something like this and you buy something of this quality, it's built to last. Now, looking around, there's a few bits I absolutely love, and there's a few bits that I question why they're like they are. So first of all, let me show you the glove box that, being a short person, I'm really struggling to reach, so I'll show you how far I'm having to lean across. Now if we pull it open, we've got the cleaning cloth in there. But again, good size glove box, you can get everything you need in there, including your cleaning cloth. And then look at this. So I don't know if you noticed over here, but we've got the clock all the way over there. So you want to hope that your driver's got their driving glasses on, because why you would have put that there, I don't know, because I feel like it would have been better situated around here or down here somewhere. It feels like over there is just a little bit too far away for comfort. Coming into the centre console here, we've got the stereo. Now I believe at the time this was an optional extra, just like, I don't know if you spotted that heated rear screen as well, another optional extra for the time. But looking at the age of it, it was either put in quite soon after the car was put onto the road or around the same time, because looking at it, it's quite an old radio. Now this is something that I do like. So if you look at these heater controls here, they are so slim and so discreet that they just merge into the design so faultlessly, and I love how they've been put in. They feel just so delicately moulded into that design that it's almost genius. In fact, it's one of my favourite bits of this dash design. Now coming down from there, this one goes out to Matt Richardson, because here we have one heck of a tea tray. So you can pull that out, and because it's the Jubilee, we probably should have bought a flask and some scones, but we haven't. So I am trying to lose a bit more weight for summer. Now coming down here, we've got a selection of different bits and pieces, and I can't remember how it goes, but one's for the rear heated screen, one is the choke, and in the centre here you have got your cigar lighter. Coming across, you've got your ashtray, and then you have got your 3-speed auto box on there. So they came as standard. That was your standard fitment with these, you would have got that auto box. Now coming in front of us, Martin doesn't like it, but I quite like it. It's these controls up here, all your panel switches. So at the top there, you've got your panel light, you've got your wipers, and also another wiper one. Not sure what's going on there. We might have to try those out actually. And on the right hand side, you've got your lights, you've got your heater, and then you'll see a blanking plate. Now that's not for a missing optional extra, because we talked about this being a later car. The earlier cars, your key would have been sitting up there, but on the later cars such as these, your key slots in down here on the column. Now just like that escargot earlier today, we've got the umbrella handbrake over here, you've got your bonnet pull down here, and you've got your cold air pull over here. Now you might also notice as well, we've got a fuel reserve, and we might need that because apparently we're getting less than 20 miles to the gallon. So it's a real act of love that Martin has lent us this car today, because it's going to cost no end in petrol. Now coming in front of us, we've got our steering wheel, and this is probably the last thing that I was a bit about. This is the horn. Have a listen. Do you ever feel like a horn doesn't fit a car? I thought it would be deeper. I thought it would command more authority. That just feels like it misses the boat slightly. And other than that, we've got our armrest here. We've got an armrest here. We are decked out for luxury. And as you can see, it's all very simply laid out, but everything that you need to be here is here with us. It's a great layout. It's a beautifully put together car. And, well, I'm awfully excited to take you out for driving it. But first of all, it's got V8. Why aren't we starting it up? Let's get her started up. Check we're neutral. Now I'm going to put my foot down so you can hear her. That's really nice. But quite often, these engines sound far better from the back than they do on the inside. So let's flip that camera around and we're going to have a listen from the outside. What is it with me and V8s? I feel slightly intimidated in this, but you know what, best foot forward and all that. Let's go for a drive. I keep forgetting where the handbrake is. There we go. I've already taken it off. Oh, that is perfect. Now these P5Bs are a glorious bit of kit, because although we can't do it today because we don't have masses of open road and we're not near a big busy A road that I can get out and test the car on, you can get from 0 to 60 in 12.5 seconds in these, which was comparable for those 2000 TCs at the time. So a lot of people looked at these and thought, looks a bit dated, it's not as cool as that P6, but it was entirely comparable, and in my opinion I actually secretly prefer this. I think this is I don't know what it is, I just think it's far nicer. Now we talked a bit about that assisted steering. It feels almost too light. It's nice, but it's a little bit, I don't know, you have to be very careful, because otherwise you can overcompensate quite easily. If I'm honest, I wasn't expecting it to be this light. Do you know what, I should probably mention something as well, and it's one of those little facts that I read in that book before I came to film, is that although you see a lot of these with wing mirrors, they were never fitted with wing mirrors as standard. It was actually one of those things that dealerships put on because people had so often requested them that they just ended up kind of offering it as an extra, even though it was never an official Rover extra. And actually I'm quite glad it's got them, because even though we have got very good visibility, it just gives you that little extra boost of confidence when you're driving along. And you know what, one easy thing it is to drive as well. And as you can see, it handles the road very well. The suspension is absolutely spot on. The handling almost feels a bit too light for me. I would like a little bit more resistance. But it's not uncomfortable. I think you could become accustomed to it quite quickly. As you can see here, in these 3.5 litre cars, you've got enough oomph behind you to keep up with your modern traffic. You don't need to be worried about that. So I think a lot of people look at older cars and think, oh, that will never keep up, but this, you wouldn't have a single problem. The one thing you might have a problem with on this is keeping up with the bills, because on less than 20 mpg, and if you're not mechanically minded to quite an extent, the parts can be quite costly. Keeping up with the running costs on it can be quite costly. So it's one of those cars that perhaps is best used sparingly rather than a car that you can use every day. And it's probably worth mentioning as well that that's why there aren't that many of these left, because of course they've been through two, well, we're coming up to probably our third oil crisis now. You had two in the 70s, and you know, we're going through a pretty tough time now with the price of fuel. And so in the 70s, when these cars were starting to look a little bit down at heel, it wiped quite a few out, because people would say, well, actually it's a bit of an older vehicle now, it's not the cool shape that people are looking for, it's costly to run. So as the repair costs mounted, people said, well, forget it, it's time to move on and get something more modern. And it wasn't really until the 80s/90s that a revival started to come about again. And I'm glad it has, and I'm glad there are still some about left to enjoy, because in my opinion, although the P6 is a really beautiful car, and it is a beautiful car from the outside, and it's an enjoyable drive, for me, the styling of this, I like that slightly more traditional styling, and the driving experience for me is actually more pleasurable in this than the P6, I'm afraid. So, I mean, yeah, I am quite old-fashioned, and I'm not always very up with the modern times, but I do think these are quite nice. And they don't cost a bomb either, which I think is something to bear in mind. So if you are looking at a P6 and maybe you can't stretch to it, maybe have a look at one of these P5Bs, because the driving experience is definitely comparable in terms of pleasure. You get that V8 experience and the petrol costs that come with it, and all round, in my opinion, it's just a more attractive car. Everything about it ticks the box for me. There is so little that I would change in it, that if somebody said to me, Steph, you've got unlimited expenses at every Shell petrol station across the country, someone will magically take care of all the mechanicking on it for you, I would absolutely jump at the chance to own one of these. It's majestic, it's beautiful, and it is otherworldly. It's exceptional. The only things that I wouldn't like about it are that clock. I don't like the clock being over there. I think that's a bit much. And of course that low MPG. It's something that I wouldn't be enjoying. And if somebody said to me, do you think maybe you should put an electric unit in it, I'm very kind of on the fence about whether classics should be electrified. But for me, this is a hard pass. It would need to stay traditional, it would need to stay on that V8, because I don't think you can better it. So it's been quite an exciting car to show you today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. This is definitely one of my favourite tests of this year. I can't stop smiling, and if I'm honest, I don't want to give the keys back. But until next time, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a fantastic Jubilee weekend. And until next time, when we're looking at something else, and maybe I'll have those road trip videos together, who knows. Take care and drive safely.